Hi everyone. In this session, we are going to deal with The Child Goes to the Camp. It is written by Ghassan Knafani and it is the very last chapter of the text Issues That Matter. It comes under the 5th module, Being a Refugee. The author of this work is Ghassan Knafani and this is the picture of Ghassan Knafani. Now I will give you a brief introduction to Ghassan Knafani. He was born into a middle-class Palestinian family. He was forced into exile during Arab-Israeli War of 1948. He lived as a refugee when he was just 12 years old. See, when he was just 12 years old. He was a painter, writer, revolutionary, journalist, etc. His major novel is Men in the Sun. And he wrote a series of short stories like All That's Left for You, Umzad, Return to Haifa, etc. His famous anthology is Palestine's Children. It is from Palestine's Children this particular short story is taken. He was finally assassinated in a bomb explosion by Israeli intelligence agency when he reached the age of 30, just 30. Now, I will introduce you to Palestine's Children, written by Ghassan Knafani. Palestine's Children is actually a series of short stories representing the Palestinian experience of Middle East conflict. Each story involves a child who is a victim of circumstances. So, the protagonist will be a child. So, when we move into the shoes of a child, we can empathize with refugees. The feelings of refugees are better portrayed through his works. Now, let's look deeper into the term refugees. Superficially, the term refugee means a person who is forcibly displaced from his country of origin. He is uprooted from his own country, his own culture, tradition, heritage, etc. So it's quite sure that he will be in existential crisis and he will be having loss of hope, loss of dreams, etc. The only thing that matters will be survival. It is for sure that the only thing that matters is survival. They will be driven by a single force, that is hunger. Just hunger, and there will be no room for morality or virtue. Integrity will not be their matter of concern. Everything else will be secondary. The only thing that matters will be survival. See the plight of refugees. The 4th photo is that of Aylan Kurdi. He was a 3-year-old Syrian boy of Kurdish ethnic background whose image made global headlines after he drowned on 2nd September 2015 in Mediterranean Sea. See the plight of refugees. They are being uprooted from their own culture, tradition, heritage, etc. Now, let's move on to The Child Goes to the Camp, the short story. Now, reading text is mandatory. You should read the text. I'll give you a detailed summary of what happens in that text. The protagonist of the story is a 10-year-old Israeli kid and the whole story is set in a refugee camp. We can expect from that in a refugee camp, moral and social values will have no relevance. Moral and social will. The whole story is set in a refugee camp where moral and social values will have no relevance. The writer clearly portrays that it was wartime, not war really, but hostility to be precise. So we know that hostility is a feeling of enmity, ill will, unfriendliness, etc. Not only between the countries who are involved in that war, but also between the people who are living in the camp, because it is the period of continuous struggle for survival. So, our narrator, who is a 10-year-old Israeli kid, is living in a joint family of 18 members. He is living along with his parents, his 7 siblings, grandfather, uncle, aunt, and his 5 cousins. We can see that his grandfather steals money for newspaper. the cheapest thing available in a household. It itself shows the plight of these refugees. They are in utter poverty. And he clearly portrayed in the third paragraph of this short story that none of us managed to find work, and hunger, which you may have heard of, was our daily worry. So, they were just concerned about survival. Somehow they wanted to have their stomachs full, and everything else was secondary. So, most often we attribute the qualities such as integrity, wisdom, virtue, etc. with older people, right? But here we can see grandfather himself trying to steal money from his grandchildren's pockets to buy newspaper, the cheapest thing available in a household. That is the condition of our narrator and his family. Narrator's father did not care much for his wife, and the narrator believes that this is because she had borne him about 8 children during time of hostility. So there is no love or affection even between the family members. So while reading across the short story, we come to a point where the duty assigned to this narrator is mentioned. The duty assigned to them means our narrator and his cousin Isam is to collect leftovers from the market. We know that they are in utter poverty and they don't have money to buy vegetables and fruit. It is quite sure that they are working in unhygienic conditions because the leftover vegetables and fruits will be smeared with mud. It's for sure. And they have got a lot of enemies in the market, like the children who share the same plight as theirs, the policemen, truck drivers, owners of shops from which they steal veggies and fruits, etc. So, the parents are also sending these 10-year-old children to steal this stuff. Just remember, it's the time of hostility and there's no room for morality. There is an agreement between Isam and the narrator, that is to eat the best whatever is left in the market. So, the major landmark of this short story comes. It is on a cold winter day, a policeman was standing in the middle of the road. Suddenly, the narrator saw a money bill under the policeman's shoes. It was a 5-pound bill. Remember, it's the time of hostility and they are in utter poverty. He instinctively threw down the apple he was eating and dropped the basket onto his cousin's hands. He stumbled upon the policeman and took the note when the policeman fell down. And he reached home by sunset. There, Isam was waiting with his parents. Isam had lied a lot to his family about the incident. Like Isam saw the bill first, Isam had to carry the whole basket by himself, narrator snatched money from him, etc. We know that it's the time of hostility, there is no relevance for truth and morality. So, his family members were least interested in finding out the truth. They were waiting to snatch money from this 10-year-old kid. We can see that the parents warned him, they began to hit him, but he was not willing to give up his money because it was found out by himself, and so he wanted it all by himself. So, his grandfather came up with a decision that the narrator had to take all children out to some place where they can chill on a sunny day. Grandfather thought that the narrator would give him money to buy newspapers. In between, we can see that the narrator's mother is bribing him to get the money from her own kid. We can also see that the grandfather trying to steal money from his pocket, from the narrator's pockets to buy newspapers when he is fast asleep. But our grandfather fails. Just see the condition. Grandparent is trying to steal money from his grandson's pocket. Just see their plight. Just imagine their plight. We know that it's hostile time and there is no relevance for morality. So the narrator guards his money for a few days and the money is in the narrator's pocket for a few days. Isam and narrator continue their daily trips to the market to get the leftovers, and but the narrator feels that a strange wall rose between them. One day the narrator meets with an accident while trying to snatch a vegetable beneath a truck. He goes unconscious, but when he regains his consciousness, he finds out that Isam stole money from his pocket, and that's the end of the short story. We should remember that it's hostile time, there is no room for morality. So even though he found out that it is Isam who took the money from him, he can't respond because it is hostile time and there is no point in asking Isam. Now let's see the influence of hostile period on refugees. At the beginning itself, narrator clearly portrays that it is wartime. So there is no value for integrity. He emphasizes on the fact that it is wartime. We can see grandfather trying to steal money from his grandchildren's pockets. We saw parents sending small children to unhygienic circumstances to collect the leftovers. And we can see the grandfather of the narrator asking his grandchildren to read aloud the latest bad news to him. And this itself shows the plight in which they are. And he takes hold of the edge of the newspaper, so these grandchildren won't take it away from him. So there are trust issues during the time of hostility. And we can also see parents beating up their kids to get just 5 pounds. Grandfather trying to steal money from his sleeping grandson's pocket. And we can see family members fighting for food, fighting for survival. Even we can see cousin stealing money from his unconscious brother. And we can conclude that during the time of hostility, during the time of war, there is now between a husband and wife, even between parents and children. It is in such a pathetic condition that they are in, the refugees are in. In a nutshell, the people in a refugee camp live in hunger, scarcity and constant threat of death. Theirs is really a very tragic situation. The domestic struggles of the narrator and his family is a reflection of refugeeism everywhere. There is no relevance for integrity, moral values, sympathy, honesty, etc. Coming to the end of the class, the lecture on The Child Goes to the Camp. Remember, reading text is mandatory. I have given you a detailed summary of that short story, but reading text is mandatory. Hope you all have enjoyed my class.